For today's class, we're doing financial wellness during tough times. I'm Russ McKeon. I'm the program coordinator for the Transitions in Retirement program. Today, Tom LaCasa and I will be doing the hosting for the program today. In terms of our classes for Transitions in Retirement, we also have another class. This one is for members. It's called Personal Finance, which is on Tuesdays from 3:45 to 5. In that class, we have a certified financial planner, Danielle Blunt, who will cover a variety of investment topics. Also, I do a weekly email for people attending this class, and I usually put the next couple of classes out there. And on the email, if there's any handouts for the class or presentations to post, I'll put those out there. So if you're interested in being added, all you need to do today is go to chat and put in, you can click on my name, Russ McKeon, and just send me your email and I'll add you next week to that list. If you haven't used chat much in the past, the main thing when you go into chat, you'll see, usually it says everyone there. There's a down arrow where you can click on it to find everyone in the class and find, in this case, my name. The key thing using chat, after you enter your message, you want to make sure you hit enter or the message won't transmit. Okay, next I would like to introduce our presenter, John Pack. He's presented at OLLI for several years. When he first came here, he started presenting on maximizing your Social Security benefit. And in recent years, he also does financial planning classes like today. Now, John is a certified financial planner, a retirement income certified professional. He's also an IRS enrolled agent with 20 years experience in the financial advisory industry. He has a Bachelor of Arts in Finance from Cal State Fullerton, Mahalo School of Business, so he's a fellow Titan here. He's completed his financial planning training from New York University and UCLA. He is very active in spearheading community outreach initiatives with local colleges, public libraries, and Southern California lifelong learning centers to promote financial literacy and empowerment through workshops and seminars. He recently joined Bloomberg Prep as a member of their Certified Financial Plan exam authoring team. He has been hired as a corporate finance trainer for a number of Southern California companies. He is the founder of Odium Advisory Group, a fee-only fiduciary financial planning firm based in Los Angeles with offices in Long Beach and Brea. Please welcome John Pack.
Good morning. More importantly, Happy New Year. I'd like to welcome everyone to Financial Wellness 2021, Mission, Return on Life. My name is John Pack, and I'll be a presenter today. So I'm going to jump right in here. Now, COVID-19 has reshaped our lives in extraordinary ways, forcing us to adjust our money habits. Now, prior to the recent pandemic, most of us Americans were already concerned with our personal level of financial literacy and readiness. However, due to this new normal created by COVID-19, it has added further setbacks. Now, if you find yourself stressed during these uncertain times, this class will hopefully help you create a simple 6-step plan that will help alleviate your anxiety and worry for any and every season of your life. So just a quick little disclaimer. I just want all of you to understand that this presentation is strictly for educational purposes. And I want to make sure that if there's any concepts that you learn from this presentation, that you do your own due diligence, whether it be researching the topics on your own, or perhaps maybe referencing some of the topics with someone who's knowledgeable about these items. Please do so. And lastly, past performance is not an indication of future results. So what is financial wellness? To sum it up in 4 words, a state of mind. It's a state where financial stress and pressure is alleviated by actions that support a well thought out plan. So you want to be mindful about what your goals are and how to achieve them using money as your vehicle. And the result? You'll make informed decisions that optimizes your financial life. So let me explain a little bit further. So financial wellness, it starts with mental preparation. Believe it or not, mental preparation is equally, if not more important than financial preparation. There's this theory called trans-theoretical model of behavior coined by a psychology professor named James Prochaska of the University of Rhode Island. And in the late 70s, he assessed an individual's readiness to act on a new, healthier behavior. And the theory guides the individual through stages of change. Now, here's an example. If you could all look at the screen here. Now, many of you in attendance may be at the pre-contemplation stage. You're not quite ready to make any drastic changes because you don't know what you need to improve on. As they say, you don't know what you don't know. But after the presentation, you'll have a better idea of what, if any, changes you would like to make regarding your financial habits. By the time you are aware of your problems, you are now in the contemplation stage. Once you start to gather your thoughts with the information I've shared today, you have now gone to the preparation stage. Once your next move is planned out, you're ready to execute the plan. And this is the action stage. The next stage, called maintenance, is a crucial one because you're now monitoring yourself to see if you can sustain this behavioral change. You'll take 2 steps back and 1 step forward along the way, but it's okay. It's an ongoing process. And normally after 60 to 90 days, if you notice you have not gone back to your old ways, congratulations, now you have reached the termination stage. So once you arrive at that stage where you're ready to take action, I would like all of you to take a moment to visualize a road trip. You're trying to determine where you want to go, how you want to get there, and by when. Understand this is not a race. Each of you will go at your own pace. Now, some of you will want to select the Porsche 911 Turbo, thinking, hey, I want to get to my destination as soon as possible. But know this, with 19 city and 24 highway miles, you'll spend a lot of money filling that gas tank on this trip. And going top speeds, 200 miles per hour, may not be recommended on a road that will be windy and hilly. Others will select the Toyota Prius for gas efficiency, dependability, and cost efficiency. The truth is, both cars will make it, but you have to determine the risk factor and the cost effectiveness throughout your personal journey. Some of you may have made the connection that the Porsche is a portfolio with all the riskiest investments that you can think of. Now, you may have really high returns one year, but you may see a huge drop the following year. That's just the nature of risky investments. Now, while the Prius may be a portfolio that has a conservative outlook, that carries a little bit of everything, from stocks to bonds to real estate to gold, the returns are not the highest, but the drops are not the lowest. So I want to give you a preview of the 6 planning tips that I'll be talking about today. Technically, there isn't an order of operations in terms of importance because they're all equally important to master. But for this morning, I'm going to start with revisiting your emergency funds, adjusting your budget. Then I'll move on to save and investing a little bit more. then updating your estate plan, taking advantage of your federal and state programs, and lastly, seeking guidance. So let's start with steps 1 and 2. If I had to combine everything into, let's say, 2 words, I call this the cash flow management stage. Now, I'm not expecting anyone to know what an income statement or even a balance sheet is, let alone how to create one, unless you are all accountants in your past lives. But let's start with income statement. An income statement shows how much money is going into your bank account. Sources can be from your paycheck, retirement distributions from your IRA, Social Security benefits, or I'm sure you've all been aware of, possibly your lottery winnings. I think I heard it reached $1 billion yesterday. Amazing. Sorry, I digress. But on the same statement, it also shows how much is leaving your bank account due to monthly expenses like rent, mortgages, auto loans, a cell phone bill, utilities. I think you get the point. And once you take your incoming and subtract your outgoing, you get what accountants call your net income. And based on your net income, you could spend it, you could save it, and or invest it. That's the goal. So here's an example of a typical income statement. Now, this is where I can figure out an adequate emergency account balance simply by looking at your monthly expenses. If your total expenses, say, are $3,800 per month, using this slide as an example, the rule of thumb has always been save 3 to 6 months worth of expenses, somewhere between, say, $11,000 to about $22,000. But if we learned anything from this current pandemic, I would recommend shooting for 1 year's worth. Bump it up a little bit more, up to about $45,000 or so. The more you have in your emergency savings account, the less likely you will have to raid any of your other accounts, like the retirement portfolio. And if you're in a situation where you can cut out a few expenses, let's say the variable expenses that show up on your income statement, it comes in handy using this statement because you can see all of your outgoing expenses on one page. And there's some categories that might just naturally drop off. Again, pointing to this pandemic, you would have noticed you're probably driving a little less. So your gas bill is probably down pretty dramatically. Perhaps you're traveling less. Perhaps you're dining out less. And for many of my clients, they also received a nice little notification from their auto insurance carriers that their policy premiums have gone down. Now let's take a look at the balance sheet. You want to be familiar with this item as well. On this statement, you have a list of all things you own that carries a value. You have perhaps your home, investments, bank accounts, and you have another list that shows what you owe to creditors. For some of you, it might be a mortgage. Others, it might just be an auto loan. There might also be some credit card debt. But once you take all your assets and subtract out your liabilities, you get your net worth. Now here's an example of a typical balance sheet. Now assets can be, again, your bank accounts, investments, real estate. Your liabilities can be housing debt, credit card debt, auto loans. And when you subtract out your assets from your liabilities, you do get your personal household net worth. But what else can you do with this balance sheet other than just calculating your personal net worth? Well, here you can pick out certain liabilities, say, for example, your mortgage, to find out if refinancing will help lower your monthly outflow. Or say credit cards. If you have multiple credit cards, find out if consolidating your balances into one lower rate will help. Now, let me share with you an example of why understanding your cash flow is important. Just like we need blood to deliver the nutrients to our vital organs to stay physically healthy, we also need cash flow to fund various financial accounts to be financially healthy. So most of you this morning may already be homeowners. And if you recall the process of applying for a mortgage, the bank reviews your application for home financing. They look for certain criteria like your credit score, bank statements, investment statements, and ultimately your debt-to-income ratio. Your debt-to-income ratio is the percentage that you get by dividing your monthly debt payments by your monthly gross income. Now, if the percentage is under 40%, most likely you'll be approved for the loan, assuming everything else checks out. However, if the ratio is above 40%, very possibly you may be denied. Now, here's another way that I use that debt-to-income ratio during uncertain times. If I could maintain a debt-to-income ratio of, say, 40%, it means that I have 60% that I can allocate towards the main buckets, like savings for emergency funds, investments for growth, as well as goals. So for example, I know a lot of my clients have been stuck at home for the past God knows how many months, and they're just chomping at the bits to go traveling again, hopefully maybe towards the latter part of this year, maybe not. But what I'm trying to say is you have 60% of cash flow that you can direct towards your needs. Now, if the debt-to-income ratio is above 40%, it just simply means you have less money going into the buckets that are important to you. So, tip number 1, adjust your emergency account to reflect 12 months worth of expenses. I'm going to go to step 3. Save and grow. Now, I'm not here this morning to talk about what you should have in your portfolio, but rather why you should have a portfolio and how to manage it during uncertain times. During difficult seasons, hanging on to cash has always been the mantra for as long as I remember. And don't get me wrong, I agree. But here lies the issue: inflation. Inflation erodes the purchasing power of your wealth. Your money today will likely buy less tomorrow. That's the basic concept. Now consider this illustration of the effects of inflation over time. As you can see, in 1916, you had 9 cents that would have bought you a quart of milk. 50 years later, 9 cents, that same 9 cents would only buy you a small glass of milk. Now let's jump a little over 100 years later. The same 9 cents would only buy about 7 tablespoons of milk. So as the value of a dollar declines over time, you invest to grow wealth and preserve purchasing power. Again, that is the concept. So before you start investing in anything that will outpace inflation, you will want to get a better idea of the financial life cycle that you're in. Now, I don't want to sit here and assume that everybody is in the distribution phase. I know plenty of retirees or soon-to-be retirees who are still in the accumulation and preservation stage. So obviously there are a number of factors that play into determining where you are in this cycle. Now, if we're in a stage where we should be focused on making and growing our money, I'm just going to pick a stage here. Let's say, let's pick accumulation. As we're heading into our 50s and 60s, you're ready to knock on retirement's door. If you're in that stage, that means you're now entering the preservation stage where you're looking for ways to preserve the money you work so hard to save and invest. And once you're officially in retirement, we call this the distribution stage. And this is where you're looking for strategies of withdrawing from various accounts without depleting the balance too quickly while being mindful of taxes. Now, there's this exercise that I go through with my clients. And I ask, what is the color of your money? This chart helps you understand what type of investment you should be carrying. If you're either looking for a guarantee of safety and income, or if you're looking for an opportunity to grow your money. But based on your appetite for risk, you can mix and match different investments from either the green side or the red side. We call this diversification. The bottom half shows a very, very simple method in determining how to divvy up your money. Now, unless you have the sophisticated softwares to assess your risk tolerance and to assess your custom tailored asset allocation, I would say the simple rule of thumb is you just take 100, subtract out your current age, and whatever number you get should be how much you should have in your portfolio that's tied to risky assets. So what is your rule of 100? For those of you taking notes, I want you to write down what your asset allocation will be based on this simple rule. Now, I want to share with you the next few slides my philosophy when it comes to portfolio management. Very, very simple concepts that all of you will understand fairly quickly. So there's this research report that was published through the Financial Analyst Journal back in the summer of '91 by 3 professionals, Brinson, Singer, and Biebauer. And what it showed was asset allocation was a better determinant of a portfolio's performance over picking the right investments or even timing the market. Having said that, this illustrates the importance of understanding your risk appetite before creating your investment portfolio. And if you can determine what your mix is, meaning how much should go into risky assets and how much should go into, let's say, something like safety of bonds or cash, that alone will provide the performance that you're looking for. So what is asset allocation? So to give you a better idea of what I mean, you'll first have to understand that the portfolio starts off with stocks and bonds right in the center. If you could slice the circle right in half, you have equities on one side, non-equities on the other. Then you have selections that branch out domestically here in the US and selections that go overseas, internationally. And it continues to spread out into small, mid, and large size companies. You can diversify by adding as many different types of stocks and bonds into your portfolio. So what does having a strategic asset allocation do for you? It reduces your overall risk. Now, I want to point out something here really quick. I know that during times of uncertainty, we have this natural inclination to want to pull our money out of all of these various assets that we may have, whether it be retirement accounts, taxable brokerage accounts, anything that poses a risk. But I want to share with you a quick chart here. This chart shows the historical distribution of US market returns since 1926. The graphic highlights that over a long horizon, the markets provide positive returns. And what I mean by that is if you look at the specifics here, the market provides positive returns for 75% of the time. So history shows that the market has rewarded investors who can bear the risk and stay committed through various periods of performance. Now, news and financial commentary can influence people's views of investing. Without a strong investment philosophy to guide you, most people may follow the advice of friends, neighbors, or family, especially if the insight promises a fast and easy return. But growing wealth has no shortcuts. Success requires a solid investment approach, a long-term perspective, and a discipline to stay on the course. Take a look at this chart. This chart illustrates the importance of staying invested in order to capture the equity premium. Now, missing out on even a few of the market's best days each year can have a significant impact on your total return. So take a look at the smallest blue box on the right-hand side. If you missed the 25 best trading days, your rate of return would have been sliced in half compared to had you just stayed in the market. Now, take a look at this slide here. Now, most of us know that the idea behind investing is to buy low and sell high. Yet, following an emotional investment cycle sparked by, say, reactive decisions, may bring the opposite effect, buying at higher prices and selling at lower prices. It is also extremely difficult to accurately time the market on a consistent basis. So investors are better served in sticking with the agreed upon plan. Tip number 2. Simply looking at your investments and just doing a quick assessment on fees. And then once you have separated the investments between, say, 2 categories, high fees and low fees, try replacing the investment with the higher fees with the lower fees. Saving money by investing in low-cost options alone will help you improve and guarantee a higher rate of return. Tip number 3. A balanced portfolio can perform just as well as an aggressive one over time. And I want to share with you my second philosophy. So the first one, just to summarize, was asset allocation. It's a better determinant of performance than any other method. And secondly, I believe that if you have a portfolio, just take a look at the graph with me here. If you have a portfolio, let's say that's in the middle of that little curvature that you see, the arrow that's going up represents your rate of return. The arrow that's going to the right or horizontally, that represents your risk. Now, there's a professor of finance still teaching at UCSD by the name of Harry Markowitz. He won the Nobel Prize for economics based on this theory where a balanced portfolio can perform just as well as an aggressive portfolio over time. So if you can just place your finger right in the middle of that line that curves to the right, the end point of that curve shows that it has the highest risk. See if I could point this out here. I don't know if you all see my little mouse cursor. To the right, you have, again, just to emphasize here, it's the highest risk. And to the left, it shows your rate of return. So what that means is if you're taking on the highest risk, you should expect the highest return. But the theory goes, if you were to, let's say, have a portfolio in the middle of the line, and you take a look at the line right below that represented risk, it points right at 50%. So you would have sliced your risk by 50%. Now, your rate of return, although it might be slightly less, it's only about 1% less or so. So that's the theory. Would you rather take 100% of risk, shooting for a 9% return, or a 50% reduced risk and earning, say, 7.5, maybe 7.75%? So the question you had was, now that I have a lot of cash and I would like to earn more than what my bank is offering, which is probably next to nil, what options are available? So going back to a couple of slides that I showed you, Paul, number one, make sure that you have adequate emergency money. Once you've passed that stage, then I would like for you to ensure that if you have the ability to invest more money, it's probably not the right time. I don't know if you've been keeping up with the market news, but we are pretty much at the height of the market. And it seems like that there's no stopping it, but I would take caution with that theory. If you had to say, play the market, I would look for diversification. So take a look at your portfolio to see what you have and what you don't have. And most likely, most of us have the usual run-of-the-mill equities, maybe mutual funds, ETFs, stocks that represent the risky assets, and perhaps, the other side of the fence, bonds and the like. But see if you have alternatives such as dividend paying positions. So dividends, the great thing about dividends, Paul, is that it has a total return component where it gives you growth, but it also gives you income. So if you feel that bonds are not providing the income that you're looking for, there are a handful of dividend paying investments that I know of that are paying out in the neighborhood of 4 to 5%. And they have a history of that type of payout for, say, 50, 70, 80, 90, 100 years. And they've been around, so that there's stability. They've seen all the major corrections and bear markets and what have you. So dividends might be a way to go if bonds are not providing the income you're looking for. The second item I wanted to point out are REITs, real estate investment trusts. They have been down and out for a while, but historically it's been a sector that doesn't quite follow the stocks and it doesn't quite follow the bonds. So in our industry, the lingo is correlation. How can we find various investments that are negatively correlated? So in other words, if one investment is zinging, you want the other one zagging, going in a different direction. And that's how you diversify your portfolio. And REITs, as well as commodities like gold, have been the ones that usually come up in conversations when you say negatively correlated. So I would look into, again, just to summarize, some dividend paying positions as well as REITs. Does that make sense?
Okay, thank you.
No worries. So step 4, protect. The 4th tip is protecting your money. You worked hard for your money. Let's safeguard it. So a component of protecting your money is by doing estate planning. Now, many of you, I'm sure, have heard of this discipline, perhaps, speaking with your family members, colleagues, neighbors, perhaps maybe even your advisor if you have one. But I just want to point out and emphasize the importance of estate planning. Now, what is estate planning? Some of you may not know. Let's go over this. It's to extend your intentions, values, patterns, and priorities to future circumstances in which you may not be able to actively participate. So what that means is, will you have a voice in the future, even if you are, say, incapacitated, or let's just say no longer with us? And there's a second definition to estate planning. It produces a plan that will help strengthen and preserve the financial security that you would like to pass on to your loved ones who are surviving. So what happens if you don't have an estate plan? Again, many of you know this. Your money goes to the state through probate. Now, the way that you avoid probate, and these are the 4 items that I want you to be familiar with, are contracts. Contracts are like, and I have an example right next to it, having a beneficiary designation on all of your financial assets. That's a contract. Number 2, operations of law. Having the right title connected to, say, I'll give you an example. Let's say your home. I want all of you to take a look at your title for your home. If you haven't done so since you purchased your home, it's a good time to take a look. How is it titled? Is it joint with rights of survivorship? Is it community property? Is it tenancy in common? You want to take a look at the titling. The third item is trusts. Now, trust, if you can picture this with me, is just an empty box. It's an empty box where you can place all of your assets into. And if something should happen to the owner of the box, it will not go to probate, because there are specific instructions that are described in the trust that detail how you want to either disperse the assets over time, or if you want to just pass it down immediately to a beneficiary. And lastly, there are will substitutes, such thing as payable on death, transfer on death, and deed in escrow. Now, here's another tip. I would like all of you to revisit your estate plan. Now, I understand that many of us do not have trusts, again, for various reasons, but the least you could have is a will, something in writing that shows your intentions. What would you like to do with your assets if you were no longer with us? And outside of a will, I also want you to have a living will. Now, the difference between a will and a living will, I know it has the word will, but it's more of a medical directive. What would you like for the doctors and your family, your loved ones to know if you're in a situation between life and death? A power of attorney is also a very important tool to have. Again, if you do not have a voice, we want to make sure that that voice is written on a piece of paper. And if you have someone who can take your place, say, for example, your spouse or your child, and they can basically pick up the baton and be your voice, that's basically a power of attorney. Here's another tip. The easiest and the most cost-effective form of estate planning is updating your beneficiary forms on an annual basis. I know you say, look, my beneficiaries haven't changed since 1985. That's fine. but still make it a habit of revisiting your beneficiary forms because things happen. I'll just leave it at that. Things happen. Family dynamics change. Circumstances change. So make sure you're revisiting your beneficiary forms. It costs you nothing. Step 5, identify financial relief through government assistance. I want all of you to know the available programs that are out there if you are under duress. Now, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I understand it's not a complete list, but these are probably some popular programs that we have witnessed since the pandemic started back in March. If you recall, the Senate passed a $2 trillion coronavirus response bill, and it was intended to spread relief across America. This rescue package, as they call it, also provided stimulus checks. If you recall, it was actually 2 rounds, if I'm not mistaken. And there's a third one that's underway. It's probably maybe a month or 2 out from being distributed, but stimulus payments was definitely one of the programs that were enacted. If you were, let's say, in a situation where you were unemployed, there were extra payments that were awarded. I believe it was $600, if I'm not mistaken. And the list goes on. There was also the pandemic unemployment assistance for those who were, say, not eligible for the normal unemployment benefits. That included people who were in the self-employment realm, contractors, or perhaps maybe even Americans who had very limited work history. There was also a delay in required minimum distributions. I'm sure many of you know that the RMD age rose to 72, but in the year 2020, there was also a postponement. If you were, say, 72 or older, you did not have to take distributions. Tax filing deadlines were extended. Perhaps many of you might have children or grandchildren who are currently paying on their student loans. So there was a little relief in that payments did not have to be made, and you would not be reported for late payments to the credit bureaus. And this was also a very popular relief program. If you look, the government-backed mortgage buyers, Fannie and Freddie Mac, have said that they would suspend all foreclosures and evictions of borrowers in single-family homes. So they have expanded their forbearance program, offering more borrowers relief for up to about a year and suspending any late charges and penalties. So I want to point something out really quick for those who recall what took place on the first distribution of those stimulus checks, also known as the economic impact payment. There was a table that showed what filing status connected to a certain income bracket equaled your payout. So step 1 was to identify your filing status, and then step 2 was to identify where you fell in that income bracket, and that determined your payment. And if you were, say, I'll just pick one here. Let's say you were married filing joint and you made less than $150,000, you should have received $1,200, either by mail or directly deposited into your bank account. And for stimulus 2 and 3, if I'm not mistaken, follows the same brackets. So just a quick word on stimulus payment number 3. Now, before being sworn into office, President Joe Biden announced a $1.9 trillion coronavirus plan, which included, as I mentioned earlier, stimulus payment number 3, and it would be worth about $1,400 if you qualified. Now, there was a lot of talk prior to, if you all remember the runoff in Georgia. But the good news is now that Biden will have an easier time passing this, quote unquote, the American Rescue Plan, now that the US House and Senate are controlled by his party. So I just wanted to make sure you were all aware of that. And there's a very high likelihood that the payments will be made. This is something that I noticed last year, where if you were running out of options and you were looking for a way to stay afloat financially, the CARES Act allowed for distribution out of your IRAs without penalties and without taxation. Now, there's a little caveat to that. You do have 3 years to pay back whatever distributions you took out from your retirement account, as long as it was paid back within 3 years. But if you chose not to pay it back, then yes, there is taxation. Okay, so for folks who are in a position where they did take money out of their retirement accounts, I just want to make sure you understood the rules behind it. If it is not replaced within 3 years, there is going to be tax, but no penalties. So the last step to the six-step process is guidance. Let down your guard and ask for help. Oops, went too far there. Now, there's only one slide tied to this last step, because there's really nothing more I need to say other than find yourself a trusted guidance counselor. They don't necessarily have to be a certified financial planner. They don't have to be in the business, but just a trusted counselor who's knowledgeable about personal finances, perhaps, or just even living, just living life. Anyone who you trust, who can be a confidant in these difficult times. And I want to point out that if you do end up speaking with, say, a finance professional, and I say finance professional because they come in all shapes and forms and different titles. So I'll just say a financial professional. The one tip I want to say, if you look at the title there, I don't know if y'all noticed, I added the word fiduciary. And the reason why I say that is, regardless of what title they have, I just want to make sure you're all aware of the term fiduciary, whether they be a CPA, whether they be a banker, whether they be an investment advisor. Make sure you're talking to someone who will always put you ahead of themselves. Okay, that's really if I could put an umbrella statement over these 4 topics that I'm about to share with you, make sure you start with a fiduciary. Okay, and once you pass that hurdle, let's talk about the first circle to the left. Now, during tough times, it's common to be paralyzed with fear and anger and anxiety and hopelessness. But a fiduciary counselor should be able to help take emotions out of important financial decisions and help you think things through logically and rationally. Now, the reason why these professionals can take the emotion out of that decision, obviously, is because they're not in it like you are, if that makes sense. They're not in your position. They're just kind of that person outside looking in. So that's why it's a little bit easier to take the emotions out. But if you're making decisions with emotions, historically, and there have been research reports that come out of my ears that talk about the negative ramifications of making decisions emotionally. So if you can find a fiduciary guidance counselor to help you with those decisions, that would be my tip number one. The second circle from the left is providing a neutral opinion. Now, this ties and piggybacks on what I mentioned about fiduciaries. I want you to look for someone who can provide sound, unbiased guidance. Someone who will have no problems leaving conflicts of interest at the door. So again, I want you to find someone who can always put you first ahead of themselves. Let's go to the next circle, sharing a different perspective. Now, if you've been helping clients resolve financial conundrums for the past 21 years, like I have, you've seen a thing or two, and you've seen so many different issues and concerns and problems. But on the flip side, I've also have come across various solutions that people just would never have thought of. So what I wanted to share is if you can find someone who not only is trusted, but also who has perhaps an experience in something that you don't, get their perspective. It might change the way you see things and the way you think and the way you do. Okay, so the last item is taking action. One of the biggest, I guess the biggest obstacles that I've seen during uncertain times, especially in this pandemic, is this thing called paralysis analysis. I'm sure you've all heard of before. And when you're in a position where you're just frozen in fear, and we mentioned the various emotions like anxiety, hopelessness, it's hard making a decision. It is. It is. And what a fiduciary guidance counselor can do is they can help push you forward. They can help you make decisions, and more importantly, execute those decisions, executing the plan. So those are my 4 components that you should look out for when selecting a fiduciary advisor. Now, will you make it to your destination? You know, I started this presentation asking all of you to picture a road trip. Now, some of you may be more than halfway to your destination. But I want to make sure that you still stay on course. And it's very crucial that the choices you make be proactive and it's tied to a plan. There's a lot of folks, I'll even include myself in the category. There are many times, even as a planner, that I react to things that perhaps come out of nowhere. But because that curveball was thrown even that one time, I will learn from that one time. And I will now be proactive in terms of if that curveball was to ever get thrown to me again, I'm ready to hit it. So again, I ask, will you make it to your destination? it might be too soon to tell, but I want to let all of you know that you are now out of that pre-contemplation stage and you're now onto the contemplation stage. Why? Because now you are aware. You are now aware. You are just one stage away from making adjustments in your life. Thank you so much for attending.
Before we adjourn today, everyone, I want to cover a couple of things about this class and some future classes. First, I would like to thank John for coming again. As I mentioned earlier, he's been coming several years, and he's one of the reasons that we've been able to keep this particular class going for 14 years. We have a lot of presenters that have been coming every year and helping us out. Okay, thanks again, John. We appreciate your time. Let me cover a few other things. Yeah, I have some future classes I just want to mention before we adjourn today. I also want to mention, as I mentioned earlier, today's presentation was recorded and it will be posted on the OLLI website where they show classes and distance learning in about a week or two. Today's PowerPoint will also be posted on the OLLI website. If you go to the home page and click on Transitions and Retirement Image and go to the classes there for this class, that PowerPoint will be posted out there later this week. So you could download the presentation, whatever you want to do with it. Let me also mention some other classes. All three of these classes coming up next week are open to the public, so you don't have to be a member. The first one is the history of American music on rock and roll. That's one of our open to the public classes on Tuesday. Next, this is a real important one, I think. Wednesday, the 27th at 9 a.m. is at one of our medical ones, and it's an update on vaccines, including flu, pneumonia, measles, shingles, coronavirus. And note that the presenter, Dr. Thomas Cesario, he's presented 3 times to OLLI since last April on coronavirus. He's really knowledgeable in that area. And I'm sure he's going to share a lot of important information on these vaccines that are available. And then next, I want to talk about our class next week on Saturday, cleaning out the clutter and hoarding. This has actually been probably our most popular class over the last 10 years. And it's a good time for all of us to kind of look at this while we're at home. And the presenter here has a handout, and that handout, we're going to post it on the OLLI website for transitions in retirement. And most of you should be getting a weekly email every Sunday on all the open to the public classes. We'll also have a link there to get the handout that the presenter will have next week. So that pretty much covers it. We're going to continue on Saturdays recording the classes, and in most cases, we'll probably be able to post the PowerPoint on the website so you have access to that.